Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're tackling something, well, you might find it hits close to home, maybe. It's atelophobia in adults, specifically autistic adults.
Yeah.
We're going to be kind of dissecting, I guess you could say, an excerpt from Cheap ABA,
Okay.
and the excerpt is called The Fear of Imperfection, Atelophobia in Autistic Adults.
Okay.
So, maybe give you some more understanding about this phobia and how it can, impact autistic adults in particular. And get ready for some surprising stuff because there are definitely some aha moments. I had them while I was reading it.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and the source material really provides some great kind of insights into it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So let's just start with the basics. I mean, I think we all probably have felt this pressure to be perfect sometimes, right? But when does it actually become like a true phobia? Like, what is a telephobia?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that's often misunderstood. And atelophobia isn't just about like wanting to do a good job.
Yeah.
It's a really intense and almost paralyzing fear of making mistakes, of not being perfect.
Hmm.
You can almost imagine like this inner critic that's just constantly shouting at you, like, not good enough,
Mm.
and it can be so overwhelming that it actually prevents people from even starting tasks, let alone actually pursuing their goals.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just painted a really vivid picture there. And I think what's really interesting about the source material is that it dives into why this specific fear might be more common in autistic adults. And
Mhm.
that's kind of where it gets really interesting, I think. For me.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and it's not just like some random phobia either. Like,
Yeah.
it's really fascinating how this connects to how the autistic brain is literally wired,
Right.
you know?
Mm.
And the source highlights several different factors. One that I think is really important is the tendency for autistic individuals to set these like incredibly high standards for themselves. They're striving for this, excellence in whatever they're doing, which is an admirable quality to have, but it can also lead to this constant fear of like falling short.
Yeah, it's almost like their baseline for what's acceptable is so high that anything less than that feels like such a huge failure.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Right.
And then you add in the element of like sensory sensitivities, right?
Yeah.
We know so many autistic individuals experience the world in just a way more intense way than other people do, whether it's sounds, textures, social cues, all of this stuff.
Right.
That can make everyday tasks way more challenging and really increase the anxiety around making mistakes.
Yeah, it's almost like the world is already louder for them, so it's like all of those anxieties are amplified even further.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder how much of that fear stems from like external factors that, a neurotypical person might not even be faced by.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And it really just speaks to how important it is to understand the lived experience
Yeah.
of autistic individuals.
Right.
The source also points to black and white thinking as a contributing factor as well. And, that basically means that autistic individuals might struggle a little bit with like the nuances of things, and they really just see things as absolutes, like right or wrong.
Right.
And that can kind of prevent them from having that, oops, I made a mistake, but I can learn from this kind of mindset.
Yeah, it's like I messed up, therefore I'm a failure.
Exactly.
Right.
And that must be incredibly hard to come back from.
Yeah. But wait, there's another layer to this too, right? Like
Yeah.
there's also social anxiety that comes into play here.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head. Social anxiety is incredibly common in autistic individuals
Yeah.
because they're often having to navigate all of these very complex social rules that neurotypical people don't think twice about.
Hmm.
And, that can really intensify this fear of judgment or criticism. And then that can just create this huge barrier to participating in like any social situation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So it's like this perfect storm of these internal and external factors that just make atelophobia so debilitating
Yes.
for autistic adults. And it's not just like in their heads, like we were saying. There are like actual neurological reasons why this might be so intense for them. Exactly. Right. And I think that understanding is so crucial when we talk about, what are the coping strategies? What are the support systems?
Yeah.
That can help. But before we even get there, like how does this fear, how does it actually show up,
Yeah.
in the lives of autistic adults? What are the real world consequences that we actually see?
Hmm.
Okay, so give us the rundown. How does a telephobia actually play out, like day to day?
Okay. So the source material really lays it out,
Yeah.
like what this looks like. And it's actually pretty heartbreaking in a lot of ways. Procrastination is a huge one.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Classic. Like if I never start, I can't possibly fail.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean,
It feels safer to avoid the task entirely than to risk doing it imperfectly.
Yeah.
But, that kind of avoidance, it only makes the anxiety worse in the long run,
Oh, for sure.
you know. And then on the other side of that, you have this perfectionism trap
Right.
where you get so caught up in the details,
Mm.
trying to make something absolutely perfect that you just pour all of this time and energy into it,
Right.
and you end up exhausted, and it's just diminishing returns.
I see that. And I feel like that ties in perfectly to what we were talking about before, like those super high standards. It's
Absolutely.
like their brains are telling them it's not good enough yet. Keep going.
Yes,
Even if, like, objectively, it's like a fantastic job.
exactly. Yeah, you're exactly right. And these patterns can leak into other areas of life.
Right.
You think about social interactions.
Yeah.
The fear of messing up, of saying the wrong thing,
Mm-hmm.
it can lead to just complete social isolation,
Yeah.
because people are trying to avoid any interaction at all to protect themselves from being judged.
Makes sense. I mean, especially if you're already, like, your brain is already kind of hyper aware
Right.
of every little social nuance. It's like the thought of having to deal with that.
It's too much.
And then on top of it, this fear of imperfection.
Wait.
Yeah, it would be overwhelming.
Absolutely. It really would. And over time, this constant self-criticism and this feeling of not measuring up, it just wears away at your self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you start to believe that you're just inherently flawed
Right.
or incapable.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking about some pretty, like, serious consequences here, right? I mean, procrastination, perfectionism, social isolation, you said, and even like self-esteem can be impacted, can really take a hit.
Yes.
It sounds like atelophobia can really get into like every single aspect of an autistic person's life.
It really can. And it's really important to keep in mind that these consequences aren't just happening in a vacuum. You know what I mean?
Right.
They're often compounded by all of these other challenges that autistic individuals were already facing in a world that's not built for them.
It's like they're already facing an uphill battle, and then this is just another hurdle.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right. But thankfully, the source material doesn't just leave us hanging. Like, thankfully, they actually offer some coping strategies.
Yeah.
Like there's some actual, real practical advice. Okay, so give us some hope.
Yeah.
What can people actually do about this?
Yeah, there's light at the end of the tunnel for sure. The source really dives into some really great strategies that people can use. And one that is often recommended is mindfulness and meditation.
Okay, so I know a lot of people hear that and they kind of roll their eyes.
I know.
But there's real science behind it, right?
Yeah.
It's not just like sitting on a yoga mat chanting.
No, not at all. It's really about training your brain to just observe your thoughts and your feelings,
Right.
including those anxious thoughts.
Yeah.
But to observe them without judgment, right?
Yeah.
So it's like instead of being swept away by this storm inside, you're watching the clouds float by.
So you can kind of create that space between you and the thought
Exactly.
instead of just letting it consume you.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I feel like that would be especially helpful for autistic individuals.
Yeah.
Because they tend to experience those emotions so intensely.
Absolutely. It gives them that sense of, control
Right.
and agency over how they're thinking and feeling.
Right. Exactly. Okay, cool. So what else? What other therapies? As I know that the source material also talks about cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes, CBT.
CBT. Remind me, how does that work, especially in the context of this?
Yeah. So imagine you're talking to a therapist
Okay.
and they're helping you identify all of these negative and often very distorted thought patterns that are really fueling this fear of imperfection.
Mm-hmm.
The thoughts like, I have to be perfect, or if I make one tiny mistake, it's all over.
Like, our inner critic just has a megaphone and is just shouting.
It's exactly the top of its lungs.
You're exactly right. And with CBT, you learn how to challenge those thoughts and how to replace them with ones that are more realistic, more balanced.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that perfection, first of all, is impossible.
Right.
And that, mistakes are actually just opportunities to grow and to learn.
It's like rewiring those neural pathways.
Yes, exactly.
To create a more positive,
yes,
supportive inner dialogue.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what about acceptance and commitment therapy?
ACT.
ACT. I'm intrigued. Tell me more about the acceptance part.
Yeah. So ACT, it emphasizes accepting that imperfection is just a normal part of life.
Mm-hmm.
For everyone.
Right.
Not just autistic people.
Yeah.
And it encourages people to kind of shift their focus. Instead of fighting those imperfections, it's
Hmm.
like, how can we just accept these imperfections and still take action?
So instead of being like paralyzed, right?
Yes, exactly. By the fear of not being perfect, it's like, okay, I acknowledge that, I accept it,
Yes.
and I'm moving forward.
Exactly. You're not letting that fear control you. You're choosing to act in spite of it.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
It's not about getting rid of the fear completely, right? It's just about, like, okay, it's there, but I can still do the thing.
Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly it.
Okay, cool. So, this is making a lot of sense to me. And of course, everyone's journey is going to be different, right? What works for one person might not work for somebody else.
Absolutely.
So it's really about finding the strategies that really speak to you
Yeah.
and provide the support that you need. So besides these like therapeutic approaches, are there any other just like practical tips that the source material offers for managing atelophobia? I'm guessing like realistic goal setting comes into play here.
Yes, absolutely. Setting realistic goals is huge. So instead of trying to be perfect right out of the gate,
Right.
it's more about like breaking things down into smaller, achievable steps.
Right. So it's like the whole how do you eat an elephant thing, right?
Exactly.
One bite at a time.
One bite at a time. Don't look at the whole thing. Just focus on this one little piece right here.
Instead of being overwhelmed by the hugeness of a task,
Yes, it's
you're
right.
just breaking it down into these manageable,
Yes,
bite-sized pieces.
exactly. And this can be really, really helpful for autistic individuals in particular, because so many of them really thrive on routines and on structure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So like having a clear plan with manageable goals, it can really reduce that anxiety
Yeah.
and make the task feel less daunting.
So instead of, I have to write a perfect novel, it's like, I'm going to write one page today.
Exactly.
Exactly.
And just celebrate the small wins.
Yes,
Build momentum as you go.
absolutely. And another really key strategy, and I think this one we can all benefit from, is self-compassion.
Oh, I love this one.
Yeah.
It's so important, right? Because we always talk about like being kind to others.
Yeah. But we forget to like have that same kindness towards ourselves.
Exactly. And for autistic people especially,
Yeah.
they're constantly bombarded with these messages of like not enough or
Yeah.
different,
Yeah.
And so practicing self-compassion can be incredibly powerful for them.
Mm.
It's really just about like treating yourself with the same understanding and the same grace that
Mhm.
you would offer to a close friend who was struggling,
Yeah.
you know?
So it's like instead of beating yourself up over a mistake, it's like, okay, I acknowledge it. I
Yes.
learned from it. And now I'm moving forward with kindness.
Exactly. You're challenging that inner critic
Mm.
and replacing it with something that's much more supportive and encouraging.
Yes. It's like you're building this support system from within.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said it perfectly. That's a great way to put it. It really gets at, what we're trying to do here, right? It's like we want to empower people
Right.
to manage Atelophobia, to still live a fulfilling life without being held back by this fear.
Right.
And it's important to remember, too, that you don't have to go through this alone.
Mm.
Like seeking professional support is actually a sign of strength. It's not a weakness.
Absolutely. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we need that extra guidance
Yeah.
from somebody who really gets it.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
A therapist who specializes in autism, they can offer strategies that are really tailored to your needs and the specific challenges that you're facing.
Mhm.
They can help you kind of navigate all of those emotions and challenge those negative thoughts and develop those coping skills.
Yeah. Finding the right therapist can be life-changing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, if we're going to take away one thing from all of this, it's that alophobia doesn't have to control your life.
Right.
Like even taking small steps, whether it's trying one of these coping mechanisms or even just acknowledging the fear,
Right.
that can make such a big difference.
Yeah. It's a journey.
It is.
It's not a race, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
And I think even just having these conversations and like shining a light on atelophobia, especially within the autistic community, I think that's huge.
Yeah, awareness is so important. And the more we understand this, the more we can support each other.
Exactly. So to everyone listening out there, if any of this resonated with you, we encourage you to just like learn more
Yeah.
about atelophobia, explore the resources that we mentioned. Knowledge is power, as they say.
Absolutely.
So thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep on diving deep.